Our verse for today is taken from the Gospel of the day's reading, Matthew chapter 9 verse 14. It reads, "Then the disciples of John came to him saying, 'Why do we and the Pharisees fast, but your disciples do not fast?'" The text we have just read addresses the question of fasting. Jesus has just finished teaching in Matthew chapter 6 from verse 16 to 18 that fasting must be done so that no one knows when you are fasting. And he has used a certain group of people to cite the example, calling them hypocrites. Presuming the disciples have heeded to the exhortation of Jesus and have tried to keep their fasting secret. And here comes some remaining disciples of John to report that Jesus' disciples do not fast. In response, Jesus offers the analogy of a bridegroom and his attendants, that attendants do not mourn when they are with the bridegroom. He continues, when the bridegroom will be taken away, at that point they will fast. The Greek word for fast is nesteia. It means to go without food for a set time as a religious duty. Fasting can be taken as an act of penitence or as a spiritual discipline that nourishes prayer. Individuals and communities can fast for a variety of purposes, including mourning, repentance, seeking divine deliverance, averting great danger, or as spiritual discipline to put our body and spirit in a proper balance. A reading of Matthew chapter 6 from verse 16 to 18 alongside Matthew chapter 9 from verse 14 to 17 sheds light on the reason for the question in Matthew chapter 9 verse 14. As for the question, why do we and the Pharisees fast often, but your disciples do not fast? Two issues need to be addressed. First, the problem of legalism, and second, the problem of hypocrisy. How did the disciples of John know that the disciples of Jesus do not fast often as they and the Pharisees do? Could it be that Jesus' disciples were not fasting, or that Jesus was against the public manifestation of fasting that was the custom? In Matthew chapter 9 from verse 14 to 17, Jesus is not only condemning the public display of fasting, but also the legalistic motives attached to fasting. The disciples of Jesus were not fasting now because Jesus was still with them. More so, the disciples of Jesus were not fasting as the Pharisees do because Jesus is against the ritualistic aspect of the law of fasting. The legalistic or ritualistic approach to fasting merely seeks to preserve the law of fasting without attending to the reasons for fasting. Today, the emphasis on fasting has shifted from its spiritual reasons to fasting for material, economic, political, and social benefits, and even for health problems that could be cured by taking proactive and medical measures. People go on fasting for 10 days, 20 days, 30 days, 100 days for man-made necessities such as shelter, food, water, and even to pass exams. People fast for prosperity. At the end of the fasting, many are left with health and mental problems. Insufficient food and water, as well as sleep deprivation, are known to induce hallucinations, lack of concentration or focus, physical and mental breakdown. These are not necessary for persons who live by the Spirit. The coming of Christ has ushered in the era of divine favor. If we understand the mission and purpose of Christ's coming, then we shall realize that the obvious bare necessities of life cannot be taken care of through fasting. Compared to the story of Jesus in the wilderness in Luke chapter 4 from 1 to 13, our fasting should be led by the Spirit. For one who is led by the Spirit do not need to observe the ceremonial aspects of the law of fasting. Fasting is not only about abstaining from food. It could also be treated as sacrifice or an act of solidarity with those who are in need. Indeed, the Bible upholds the type of fasting prescribed in Isaiah 58 from verses 6 to 7, to loose the chains of injustice and untie the cords of the yoke, to set the oppressed free and break every yoke. Is it not to share your food with the hungry and to provide the poor wanderer with shelter? When you see the naked, to clothe him, and not to turn away from your own flesh and blood. Let us be guided by the right teachings. Let us promote the fasting that addresses economic, religious, and social justice. Let those in affluence and the corridors of power give their time and resources for the context and experience of people who are marginalized and impoverished. May we always be led by the Spirit to do the right things, especially in matters of life and living. May we be inspired to spend our lives in bringing transformation that will reduce the abuse of religion and its teachings. These and many more we ask through Christ our Lord. Amen. Shalom.